We have, in our research, it's something like 85, 86% of all companies say they want a great culture. When we go in, there's probably about 20% have a strategy to do it. There's a strategy to all of this. It doesn't just happen. Let's build a strategy which is very mindful of those levers that we've been talking about to get us to where we need to be.
Big idea number one, clearly define performance.
Got to work with the NBA, NFL teams, working with some NFL teams right now, NHL teams, basketball, baseball. I'm like, I love it. But I've always been about performance. I played rugby for a number of years, and I was like, how do you get someone to perform really well? And so done a lot of sort of work into that space. And we've really, when people talk about culture, they get a little glazed eyes and I'm like, all right, this is what we're going to talk about. As soon as I turn them and say, well, are you interested in the performance? And they go, oh, absolutely. So we talk about how do you elevate the individual performance and the performance of the company. It starts with those hearts and minds. And so the thing that I always get into is to go, what is performance? Performance is a simple equation of what versus how. Now, this is really important. Traditionally, performance was like what? Did you win? What were the results? Did you hit your goals? All people ever cared about, and unfortunately, even in a stock market or stock-driven world, people just want to know the financial numbers. Did you hit your numbers? Unfortunately, when it comes to performance, that's only half the equation. Because what happens is if all we care about is the win and results, but we don't focus on how you get those results, then really weird things can happen. So John had the best sales numbers. And so if he was one of 21, that means there were 20 other salespeople that were hanging out. And so we did interviews, talked to everybody, looked at everything. We came back to the general manager after about a week there and he says, I'm just going to let you know you got a John problem. And the general manager was like, what? I'm like, you've got to be smoking. He looked at me like I'm an idiot. Actually kicked me out, called me, and I was like, this guy's an idiot. He wants me to get rid of my top sales guy. And I said, well, I didn't say get rid of him. I just said, you got a John problem. You see, John, the top sales guy, was such a loner. He would backstab. He would do every trick in the book to basically make the lives of the other 20 salespeople miserable. He only cared about himself, but he only cared about the results. And as a result of that, all the other salespeople hated this guy, and it was impacting their performance. Anyway, we sort of left. I remember about 4 months later, got a call to go back to that dealership. They had to let John go. Just went a step too far. Harassment, abuse, it just got out of control in one particular incident. Do you realize that within about 4 months, all 20 of those salespeople were outperforming all their numbers up until that point? The sales team as a whole were outperforming all the numbers that had, including when John was there. And the bottom line is that if we're not focused on what and how, then we never create the right type of performance to really exceed.
Big idea number two, enable and empower your teams.
What was my number one role? If I go back to any manager's role, it's to make sure that my people can perform every day. So the first thing is enable them. My job was to make sure they had the right training, skills, tools, information, and support to do their job. If you give an employee the right training so they know how to do their job, you give them the necessary information to make good decisions that day, the tools are in place, and they know that I am there to support them, they can perform. So that's what I talk about when it is enabled. So now managers are often pretty good at that because they know that they have to do the what. But the key where they don't do so well is then let go. And that's the empowering part. If I do my job really well and I set them up for success, I don't need to micromanage them. Yet that's exactly how a lot of managers define their role every day. They make themselves important by keeping certain information to themselves, being the one having to make big decisions in the moment. Oh, you've got to come to me and ask for permission. Being the resource, they're like a bottleneck, where they control things so that they can feel important themselves. I often say that the best leaders that we have, the best managers, are the ones that make themselves dispensable. That's actually the only way to become indispensable, so you can actually focus on higher order things.
Big idea number three, have coaching conversations.
The most important skill, I believe, particularly for young managers, supervisors today, is how to give informal feedback. The most important coaching conversation is the quick, casual conversation that happens in the moment when you see someone do something well or not so well. It's
Right.
informal. It's not documented. So many managers have to document every conversation they have. So once you document, it's formal feedback. When you're just having a casual conversation, it's informal. Formal feedback is like your reviews, disciplinary action, all of that. When you formalize everything, man, you just stifle your people because they're always afraid of
Right.
formal. It's got to be documented. It's like such a heavy load. Informal is quick, casual conversations. You have a little bit of fun with your team, but you let them know that you saw them. There's so much dissatisfaction with our recognition programs. There's frustration with discipline. And don't get me into the annual reviews, which people just seem to hate. The reason is because they're always a surprise or there's no validity behind them. But
Right.
if you have a lot of these informal check-ins, all of a sudden you're starting to create the trends. And then when it comes time to say recognize somebody or put them up for something, you go, gosh, I've been recognizing or been talking so positively about this person for so long, need to put them up on a pedestal. Hey, I've been having a lot of conversations about this problem and not buying into this. Hey, we might have to have a different conversation. But that sort of regular cadence of performance meetings becomes really critical when you sit down to now have serious conversations about bonuses, incentives, career development, as I said, recognition, maybe discipline, but those formal conversations now have some validity behind it. We've got to get better at being informal. That means managers get out of your office. That means not being on the coalface, take a step back, inspect what you expect, work alongside your teams and employees, and give them the feedback that they're looking for to perform better. That's what good coaches do.
Big idea number 4, customize your recognition.
People process information 3 ways: visually, auditorily, or kinesthetically. So visuals have to read it and see it, auditories have to hear it, kinesthetics have to touch and feel it. So we get that. I think that's so important when you think about recognition, because people process that recognition differently. Up to 50% of employees will say, my manager doesn't say thank you. Now, go and ask the same group of managers that manage those employees, and they'll say 85% to 90% of the time, they are in fact saying thank you. So there's this disconnect. And I've always like, well, how can employees think it's so low and managers think it's so high? Well, part of the problem is that the auditory people that process, it's only about 19% of the world actually process information auditorily. So here it is, a manager saying thank you, yet a big part of their employee base, maybe over 80%, are actually not connecting the dots. They don't process it that that's a thank you. It goes in one ear and out the other. So our auditory people, while saying thank you is very important, we have visuals. They have to have it written down. They want to see it sort of on a piece of paper or in an email. Then they process it. The tough part, which is about 50% of the world, is our kinesthetic learners. Because again, for them to process it, it needs to be touch and feel. I always call it, they got to have a piece of the cake. So for them to get recognition, you got to have the pizza party. You got to have something a little bit more. So the message that I give is that as managers, don't just think because you're saying thank you that you're doing a great job with recognition. And I believe you. You are probably saying thank you a lot, but your employees aren't seeing it as true appreciation. Recognition is not about rewards. I think we get mixed up. It's about, we have to spend lots of money on rewards. Recognition just has to be customized and meaningful.
Big idea number 5, be willing to have tough conversations and make tough decisions.
I love, there's a writer, Peter Bromberg, who sort of said, when we avoid tough conversations, we substitute a moment of discomfort for a longevity of dysfunction.
Yeah.
When it comes to these difficult conversations, remember, these could be your best people. They're already giving you what results. So don't downplay that. And so I think that's really important, that you want to get in early and make sure that by using the values, you now have some behaviors to point to that I think are really valuable in having these performance conversations. Then that's, of course, tough conversations. Unfortunately, some people still don't get it. Sometimes you got to make tough decisions. And I think this is important. And please, everybody remember this, not everybody should work for you. Not everyone will be successful in your culture. And that does not mean that they're bad people. That doesn't mean that they're not people that have a lot of worth and can be excellent in other places. So I want to put it out there. What they do need to find is the right fit, and not always the right fit will be with you. So when you have to make a tough decision, sometimes it's for the benefit of that person, getting them to that right place in their life where they can find something that they're happy with. Before you ever have to make that tough decision, ask yourself, have you done everything to set them up? Have you enabled them? gave them the training, got the information. They know they had the support. I empowered them. I've made sure that I've recognized them when they've done something well. I haven't isolated them or set them apart. I've made sure that I've done everything. When I can look at myself in the mirror and say, you know what, I've done everything I can, making that tough decision is not so tough. And it is the right thing, not only for that person, but more importantly for your team and that as well, that has to perform each and every day.
Big idea number 6, communicate effectively.
Everything we've talked about so far probably has something to do with communication. And communication is just such an important sort of part. I'd argue it's probably a manager's most important tool. And so one of the things they have to do is they always have to learn to be better communicators. I believe that when you're a manager and you're a good leader, you actually simplify your communication. It's one of my things that I urge everybody to be a great communicator is how to say things in its simplest way possible so everyone understands it. For me, the secret to communication is understanding. And again, I'm going to go back to so many managers don't get this, which means they'll say something once. They stand up in front of their team, they'll say something once, and they expect everybody to get it and run away and do it. And instead of going, do you understand? Does everyone agree? Do you know what to do next? And they all go, yes. You need to start being a little bit more specific. And you go, okay, Mary, can you tell me, as a result of that, what we're going to do today? So you start to go, oh, wait, what is the action that's going to happen? Then you'll know whether or not they understand it. Or as a manager, I've talked about this before, one of my mantras, inspect what you expect. Which means, hey, you've set expectations. Make sure very quickly you go and inspect that what you thought was going to happen is in fact happening and that there's not some confusion around it. Big idea number 7, be willing to listen. Managers, particularly young, believe that as a manager, you need to know it all. And there couldn't be, that couldn't be further removed, I think, from the truth. I believe, to become a great manager, a good leader, that you have to always be curious. The opposite of curiosity is grandiosity. I know it all. Even as you keep going further and further up the food chain, I work with a lot of executives. I do a lot of that, and they act grandiose because they believe they have to be grandiose. They believe they have to know it all. That's their job. That's what I get paid for. And I try to go, no, that's not what you get paid for. You get paid to get your company performing. One of the best ways to get your employees' hearts and minds and to create a great culture is to let them know that you're curious about them. You're curious about them as people. You're curious about their ideas for improvement. You're curious about how they're feeling about coming to work every day. So that's really important. You have to have that curiosity. Now, when you have curiosity, you're willing to listen. Big idea number 8 is demonstrate that you care. We do our research of things that inspires employees to be their best. Caring comes up time and again. About 36% of all employees believe that if their manager demonstrates care, that is probably one of the biggest motivators. It inspires them to perform better. Big areas that you have to think about. Are you approachable? Of course you're approachable, but are you approachable all the time? Many times managers will get frustrated because they're like, they're having a bad day or they're dealing with a ton of things, and an employee comes and says, hey, I need to speak to you. And you're like, no, not now. Let's do it later. Well, I've learned that later never happens. So, that approachability, it's such an important moment when an employee comes and says that. And I know it's tough, but have the discipline to schedule. Respect is a big thing about caring. The definition of respect comes from the Latin respectus, which means to look back on or to look at. And I think this is really important because managers need to look at their employees and go, what are you really great at? Again, I've talked about getting out of the office, working alongside people, but to respect someone means you see the good in them, you see their strengths, point that out. I think that's important. Big idea number 9 is make your employee's career a priority. Listen, people today want to know what's next. And again, younger people want to know what's next yesterday. So it's becoming more and more important. So that's just career. If you've got people that are delivering what you want, really focused on the fact they're doing it the right way, you need to be like, where do you want to get to? And so there's 3 things that I always advise managers to think about. If you're focused on someone's career, you should know 3 pieces of information. 1, what was their career highlight to date? So if this is the first time you're sitting down with someone to talk career, go, all right, what was the biggest moment in your professional development so far? Second is, what is your big picture goal? Where's the vision for you of what would the pinnacle of your professional career to be like? I want to run my own business. I want to run this company. I'm like, know how big the mountaintop is. But then the most important question is, what can I do for you in the next 12 months to help you get to the mountaintop? Yeah. And so that piece of being able to take those steps is so critical. And I go back to being this coach now. Again, my job as a coach is to get you to where you may not be able to get yourself. Find out what the mountaintop is. I know what the high has been like so far. So I'm like, oh, that's a high. How can I beat that? How can I kind of add some emotional element to it in this journey? And if people know that you have their vested interest, and it's not about making sure they get promoted, because I think in today, young people particularly are very comfortable moving around all over the place. So that they're okay to leave jobs, come back, leave jobs, come back. That's normal. But what they want to know is that their manager cares enough and is invested enough that they know career is important and they're taking those steps. And this isn't about spending lots of money and lots of time. It's about managers when they work alongside them. It's about giving them some advice, sharing experience, sharing some expertise. That lets them know that their career is important to them.
Big idea number 10 is lead by example.
Get out of your office. John Le Carre, spy novelist, you might have read some of his books. The quote is, the desk is a dangerous place from which to view the world. Get out from behind your desk, managers. You've got to get out in front. Schedule time every day when you work alongside your employees. When it's busy, I love it. When a manager turns up when it's busy and turns it on, and they perform the right way, they do the things, they might help out for an hour, but they perform and they adhere to the values. Gosh, there is no better communication, coaching, all of the things we've talked about so far, it's brought together, but leading by example. And that's, it's big. And that's why I'm saying it's really hard. If the manager's always on the coalface, it means they always have to be on. I don't believe they have to always be on. What's interesting now, we've done some research that we've identified about 9 moments a day, a total of about 15 minutes when a manager needs to be on emotionally for their employees. So my message is you don't always have to be on. You've got things to do. You can be in your office. You can be at the desk. You can go to meetings. You can do all those things. But every day, schedule that time to get out in front of your employees. Schedule every day at the start of their shift to say welcome and how are you doing. Schedule time at the end of the day to say, you guys rocked today. You certainly made a difference and make their work meaning. But that's lead by example. And again, of all the things that, people sort of say, well, what do leaders do? For me, it's just the example of what great performance looks like in your organization.
We hope you found this video valuable. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and opt in for notifications so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. If you'd like to learn more about the speaker in this video, there's a link in the description below. Also, before you go, would you like access to a free, in-depth video training on how to dramatically improve employee engagement and retention? There's a link to that free training as well in the description below. Until next time, we wish you great success building a world-class team or organization that makes a positive impact in the lives of your team members.